Is software minimalism just a meme, or is there actually something useful to it? Let's discuss. Good afternoon, all you big brain Linux users. So today we're talking about minimalism. So you may think it's weird that I would even bring this up on my channel, because if you've watched a lot of my previous videos, a lot of the stuff that I talk about are these very simple command line applications. But I don't necessarily think that minimalist software is the best way to actually get work done. So the reason why I use things like Scrot for screenshots, or I'm going to be switching to MAME soon just because it's a bit of a better application, or I use a terminal file manager and other things like this. The reason I use these applications is not because they're minimal applications, but it's because they are fast applications. So if we take Scrot, for example, if I want to take a screenshot of my entire screen, I don't need a GUI application for that. It's really useless to have something like that massive. I've been using Flameshot for a while, and it's a solid GUI application. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. For something like screenshots, there's really no point to have a GUI application for that. Same with file browsing. LS is a bit too minimal. I'll get to that later in the video, where minimalism can be taken too far, but you don't really need a GUI application to go through your files. That's really not that useful. If you can find a much faster and much lighter terminal application that will do just exactly what you want it to do, and pretty much nothing else, then you might as well just use that. Or if we take another example, like, say, backlight light control, there's no reason to use a GUI tool for that, because pretty much all you're going to be doing is raising and lowering an integer value, and the same with your volume and other things like this. There's really no need to have a bigger GUI application for these, when what you're trying to do is a very simple task. So where I think the minimalism in software shines is for these very simple tasks where you don't actually have a really complicated scenario to work with. A lot of people will make the argument, for example, for things like video editing and image editing using things like ImageMagick and I don't remember what the video one is called. Some FFmpeg, that one. A lot of people recommend FFmpeg as well. But when it comes to video and like photos or images, those are inherently graphical jobs. So in situations like that, yes, I want to use the lighter applications. Like, I'm not going to intentionally use a really slow GUI application to do my work. I'm not also just going to use a CLI tool because I want to use a CLI tool. I'm going to use the best tool for the job, and in a situation like that, a GUI application is the best tool for the job. I'm using Kdenlive for video editing, and I'm using GIMP for my image editing. Mainly, image editing for me is thumbnail creation. I could do that same stuff with ImageMagick, and I could do it with FFmpeg. For something like that, it's going to be so much harder to actually get the work done. In a situation like that, it's better just to use the GUI application because it's inherently graphical work. But then you take something like text editing. So the standard for text editing for most people is a rich text editor. Like, if you're on Windows, then it would probably be something like Microsoft Word, or if you are on Linux, then it's probably something like the LibreOffice suite. Or maybe you use Google Docs, I don't know. Some sort of rich text editor is generally the standard for most people, but you really don't need to be using a rich text editor for the most part. Most people, when they are using a text editor, are using it for just note-taking or just writing a very simple document. And in situations like that, you're probably better off just using something like Markdown. I wouldn't recommend LaTeX for note-taking, but when it comes to documents, especially documents that you need a specific format for, LaTeX is a far better choice. And for something like that, you can't use a rich text editor. You have to use a lightweight text editor, or you don't have to use a lightweight text editor, but you have to use a plain text editor. And when you are using a plain text editor, you really want something that is as light as possible, something that you can, say, macro and make work exactly how you need it to work. And for something like that, I think that using Vim is a way better option than using any GUI tool. Some people swear by something like GVim, the graphical version of Vim, but I don't think it really adds anything extra that Vim has. You really, really can't live without proper mouse support. And I think the last example that I'm going to use is for code editing. So I'm going to do a separate video on code editors versus IDEs, but I'm going to briefly mention the argument here just for the sake of this video. So when it comes to scripting languages like Python, Ruby, Shell script, JavaScript, these sorts of languages that are not the same as traditional programming languages, the distinction is fairly weird at this point, but the scripting languages, you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't think there's really any point to using something like one of the big IDEs. I think for a situation like that, you're much better off just using a code editor, because you're not really going to get anything extra from using an IDE in those situations just because of the way those languages are structured. A lot of the benefits that come from an IDE are things like proper code completion, but with a duck-type language or a loosely typed language, those features don't really work properly. But when it comes to something like Java, C#, C++, these proper programming languages that are statically typed, then you actually do get a lot of advantage from that. And in those situations, you also tend to want to use a lot more refactoring tools and debugging. I'll do a video on debuggers. I have some interesting opinions on those, but a lot of people like them. Or you want to use code completion, especially in something like Java or C#. I couldn't use either of those languages without code completion because the libraries are just that massive. You're never going to be able to get anything done without it. If we bring up the Vim example again, in this situation, Vim is way too minimal, because to get Vim to a state where you can actually use it as a code editor, it requires so much extra work that you might as well just go and download the code editor that already works as a code editor. There's no point turning a super minimal tool into a code editor, because at that point you're kind of defeating the point of using a minimal tool. If you're making it a massive application, you might as well just start with the massive application and skip those extra steps. So to answer the initial question that I proposed, is minimalism just a meme? It really depends. So if you are taking it to its absolute extreme and you're just using minimalist software to do everything, you're doing your image editing with your CLI tool, you're doing your video editing with CLI tools, your web browsing with a CLI browser, you don't even need JavaScript. Don't try that. Very bad idea. Most websites are built with web frameworks, and if you don't do that, if you don't have JavaScript, pretty much the entire web breaks. And I might discuss that at some point, but JavaScript is a requirement to use the web in its current state. So if you are going super hard on minimalism, yeah, that's dumb. That's just a meme. Don't do it. You're not going to get anything productive done. You should just use the most appropriate tool for the job. So I use minimal software most of the time, because most of the time you can get more done by just using the lighter, quicker application. But in the situations that are naturally graphical, like image editing and video editing and things like that, I will use the bigger application, but I still tend to want to use the lighter and quicker application. So in that regard, no, minimalism is not just a meme. It's better to use the quicker application. That should be pretty clear from the outset. So to sum everything up, pretty much just use the best application for the job. If that happens to be the minimal tool, then use the minimal tool. If it's not, then whatever. And if you don't care and you just want to use the most minimal software for everything, I can't stop you. Use whatever you want. It's your computer. I'm just going to use what I want to use. So if you like this video, I'm going to smash that like button and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think of this video. If you think the lighting setup actually looks better, let me know, because I've got a cheapo desk lamp off to the side with a ridiculous globe in it, and I'm recording at 5 PM right now. Normally that would be completely impossible with my setup because I wasn't really doing any proper lighting, but if it looks decent, I guess my lighting works. I'm going to get another light for the other side, so I'll be able to record at night, and hopefully that will come soon and everything will look better. So if that does look better, let me know down in the comment section below. So if you want to see more from the channel, remember to subscribe and hit the little bell icon below, and maybe you'll get updates. But if you don't, because we can't trust YouTube to actually push updates to anyone, then go follow my Twitter and my Mastodon, and you'll see daily posts there about the random videos that I put up, and you'll occasionally see some other stuff. Maybe I'll talk about my new lighting setup or something else. So I think that's pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.